I'm Chris Higham, a sheep and goat farmer at Meadow Station in the Gascoyne area of Western Australia. When I grew up on a farm, there would have been very few females in the industry that were truly a farmer in their own right. It was an era that was male-dominated. I think we were seen as incapable of running a farm because people didn't think we had the strength to do it.
Come on, come back here.
If I hadn't have married Tim, if I'd married someone from the city, I wouldn't be farming. Being a farmer is not about the physical, it's about making decisions and understanding the system. There have always been goats in this landscape, and they were originally considered feral. I was looking at an animal that was so underutilised, wondering why there's not goat meat available. It's a really healthy meat. You don't walk into any supermarket and see goat, it's a specialist butcher. I think it'd be terrific to have Aussies eating goat on a regular basis. Mustering in the hot weather means that we get the best numbers we possibly can because they're in and out all the time for water. The goats are usually pretty good to work with. They're very responsive, they learn quickly. Oh, you buggers. But they can be frustrating sometimes. I do enjoy that challenge of getting an animal to settle down. We really like to do our goat mustering when the school holidays are on so that we can have a hand from our girls.
There's no billies in that lot, is it?
Sometimes it's just Tim and myself, but generally one of our girls is with us. I enjoy the challenge of selecting and growing them out. Not all the goats that are on the station are suitable for my business. First, we were farming goats, but really just harvesting goats and putting them on a truck for export. But I have been on a mission to get the general public eating goat and understanding that goat is a whole lot more than a curry. People are now hungry for different experiences, so I started wondering why we couldn't capitalise on that. And then our next door neighbours put in a caravan park. They were looking for meals to on-sell, and I thought, I can do that. And so that's where I started. I knew nothing about pastry, and I'm still learning. No one would describe me as a cook. But I do enjoy coming up with new ideas until I hit a flavour profile that I'm happy with. We've now got a range of goat pies, goat sausages, smoked goat hams, anything I can dream up, really. Not everything works all the time. Obstacles just make for creative thinking, for how are we going to get around this? How can we beat it to get to our end point?
Yeah, just bring one side down again for that level.
The PR side of the business has definitely been a challenge for me. I'm certainly not used to sitting in front of a camera and telling a story. It's quite intimidating, in fact. However, the consumer is hungry for connection with the grower. They like to know where their products come from, what's gone into it. That has been a big learning for me. I think there's plenty of opportunity for women to come in and try things, and that's why farming partnerships can work, can really be effective, because we have different styles of thinking. I identify as a farmer and a farmer's wife. We're in the game together.